Today, I'm joined by Oscar-winning and Emmy-nominated supervising sound editor and re-recording mixer Niv Adiri, whose work on Netflix's Lord of the Flies transforms a tropical island into one of television's most immersive and psychologically charged sonic worlds. Niv, congratulations on your two Emmy nominations, and thank you for being on the show.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for that lovely introduction as well.
So, Niv, you have now scored your first and second Emmy nominations of your career to date. To receive recognition in both sound editing and sound mixing for the same episode, Piggy, is incredibly special. What has this recognition meant to you personally and to the team behind the scenes?
Yes, like you said, it's a great honor. We worked really hard on this series. It had its challenges and rewards. Mark Mundin, who is the director, we worked on a TV film and another series as well. So we have this relationship. He's an amazing filmmaker, very collaborative. So just to be nominated for something we did together with him meant a lot. And obviously, my team is an amazing team that we've been together for many, many years. A lot of hard work went into this. And, like I said, it had its challenges, but just to get on the other side with such a recognition, it's amazing, especially by your peers. It's an American organization, and to come from the UK to be recognized from the UK, it means a lot as well.
Yeah, and in both as well. So let's talk about why you were nominated. This is a project that was adapted from such an influential novel, Mark Munden directing, Jack Thorne writing. What excited you most creatively about that opportunity, especially in terms of working with Mark? And what kind of conversations were you having about how this island should feel and sound?
Yeah, so conversation started quite early on. He was there for a month with Andy, your friend, the sound recorders, who did an amazing job, by the way, under the circumstances for sure. We started early on talking about how to, like, bring this book to life. It's obviously talking about a group of very young children. The book gets very, very dark. And so the idea was always, to get there's two sides to this. One is the ultra realistic sound of the island, which is so rich and so versatile, and the other one is the psychological soundscape, that's driven by drama, really. And just to get the thread between them right was always a challenge. When we got the material, everything was on screen. The Mark and the editors did such an amazing job of really focusing. Mark does quite a lot in the cutting room as well as a guide, so he gets all his ideas down, albeit they're not perfect and they're not the right things, and there's stuff that you can't use, but it gives you a beautiful guide of where he's going with it. And so we had these conversations, these spotting sessions, and they're more like a chat about emotions, not about, I want birds over here, I want the sea sound over there. It's more about the emotions and the emotional arc that he wanted to progress through the series and every episode by itself. Just going back to your question about episode one for me had the most beautiful arc of introducing the whole soundscape of the series, from ultra realistic Piggy waking up in this island, walking through the island, finding every section of the island, every area, and just setting this up with sound until meeting Ralph, meeting the other boys on the beach. Everything was normal and ultra realistic, until Jack and the choir shows up, and then all the natural sound, the beautiful birds disappear, the sound of the waves, that rhythm of the waves takes over. And so your emotional arc and your darkness starts over there already. So yeah, I mean, it is just going back to what you said. Working with Mark is always a pleasure. He's giving you free range of like, go for it, surprise me, let's go too far. Is this too much? Is this too much? While you're mixing, is this too much? And it was like, no, no, it's great, it's great, it's great. And that type of collaboration is amazing for a sound person, for any member of the team, for a sound person. So both me
Yeah.
and yeah.
Um, I actually wonder, given the pilot opens with Piggy isolated and disoriented after the crash, even before any dialogue is spoken, the sound is really placing us inside his experience. And I just wonder, for that episode specifically, how much of your thinking was tied to subjectivity in terms of you're asking yourselves, what does the island sound like through Piggy's ears?
Mm. Yeah, there's a lot of that for sure. So like I said, when he wakes up, we discover the island with him. So there's silence, and there's hardly any music in the first 7 minutes, apart from him singing a little song and a little flair by the creek when they jump in, um, and it's very much subject to what Piggy is experiencing and how we discover. So almost where he looks, that's what you hear, including the flies, including when he discovered the pig, the dead pig, and the engine of the airplane. So there's no sounds that sort of precede the picture. We're discovering it with Piggy, um, and that goes through the whole episode. When he hits his head, the sound disappears until it comes back to, until the very end, where you hear the whole soundscape through the conch, which he holds in his hands, and that's how the episode finishes. So it's very much subjective to his discovery of the island, for sure.
I'm just wondering as well, Niamh, you occupy the unique position of being both supervising sound editor and re-recording mixer. Did wearing both hats change the creative process? Meaning, were there advantages in shepherding the entire sonic journey through to the final mix?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. For a long time now, myself and us as a team, trying to do exactly that. So, from the first conversation with the producer, editor, director about the soundscape, about the feeling, about the emotion of the piece, um, I'm myself and my team, but as a leading sound designer, it's from designing the first sounds into mixing it into the final piece. So that thread of continuity is such a special relationship with the piece, with the soundscape, but also with the director. So he knows that once we had that conversation in the beginning, we it's still going to be me, balancing those sounds at the very end with him in the room. And that continuity is priceless for me. You don't, there's no mixes that come in at the last minute and you need to start explaining. Or actually, here we're trying to do this, all of that disappears. What you're dealing with is literally just working, just making it, mixing it. Um, so, I mean, I love that. What happens when you go into the final mix? But even as we go through the process, because I wear the two hats, um, when the team works on the sound, or it will be the dialogue or sound design, and I get it into my studio and put it together, then I stop listening to separate elements, as you do when you design sound. You get so fixated on this one sound that you worked on for weeks and it's so good. But when everything comes together, all of a sudden, actually, that's in a way. And so the greatest power, or the most difficult thing, is to actually mute things and lose things and make space to things and get things
Yeah.
focused, right? So I'm getting better at it. Sometimes it's difficult when you think, oh, but I love this sound so much, we're working it so hard, I really want people to hear it. But you have to be really realistic, step back and listen to the whole thing, and most importantly, concentrate on the story and each shot, each scene. What are we trying to say here? What the director's most important point at this moment? And that's what you focus on. If it's a line of dialogue, it's a line of dialogue. If it's a line of of strings, it's a line of strings. If it's a sound design, is that. But yeah, certainly work doing both jobs is for me really rewarding.
Yeah, I can imagine. And it would be so hard to subtract things because
Yeah,
you're so proud of what. Speaking of, actually, your colleague, production sound mixer Andy Sher, he described the extraordinary environmental challenges of making the series. By the
yeah,
time the material reached you, what were the
yeah.
biggest post-production battles? What helped you preserve the authenticity of what the crew captured in those conditions, but also thinking objectively about what's going to work for story?
Yeah, that's a great question because as you can imagine, because it was such a lively environment, with all the elements working against you, we actually got an amazing recordings from them from Andy and the team, and we also had a set of ambisonic recordings of each section of the island, which we actually used in the piece, but it gave us more than anything, gave us a reference of what it actually sound like. So when Mark said, "Oh, we had these birds and these noises and this," we can actually hear it. And so then you go about sourcing those elements on their own because it's very important to have as much separation as possible for when you're mixing, so you have control over each element. But we definitely used their recordings, and it gave us an amazing palette um, and of backgrounds. That's one thing. In terms of dialogue, I mean, I don't know how they did it. I really don't know how they did it. I don't know if you watched the documentary on behind the
Yeah,
scenes. I
yeah,
mean, I
insane.
mean, so yeah, it had its challenges. A massive challenge was that halfway through episode one, everybody take their shirts off, and so the lavs just goes up the window.
Yeah,
They've got hidden mics and wherever they could put their lav mics, but relying a lot on boom mics. So we're able to get quite a lot of separation. Linda, who was heading the dialogue team, did an amazing job with her team separating them, and we had a lot of coverage. There is a lot of coverage, to be fair. So it was a case of, like, in every piece, put all the mics up and then start selecting and focusing on what needed at each moment. There was also a lot of cleaning up that we did, a technical cleanup, which is part of every production these days.
yeah.
So we will manage to get a lot of the original performances, but also had some ADR. We had a Walla, crowd Walla sessions, which was really, really important because the chaos of these boys on the island, not listening to anyone, doing their own thing, was so important to Mark. And it creates that tension that you see someone speaking and you just about hear him, but is it enough? Is it not enough for the audience to hear? But you still want to convey that chaos. And Mark was like, I don't want him to be too loud because that's not realistic.
Mm.
These kids are out of control. So we had a lot of Walla sessions, but actually with the most of them with the original cast, which Mark insisted
Wow.
on, which was never happens. So we had the actual kids, not some kids that never, So the kids, by putting them in the studio, it took them back, and they remembered what it felt like, and they remembered what they were doing. So it was so natural, and so
Wow.
went into the piece so easily because
Yeah.
it was them.
It was
Um,
them.
it was them, but
It's yeah.
we couldn't be thankful enough to Andy and his team of the amazing job they did. Seriously, it was it was really is. But when we saw it, we
Yeah.
saw the picture, I say, "Oh my God, are we going to hear anything here? Or we need to edit?"
I know.
And of course,
It's
the
like a
kids,
miracle.
I know, and of course, the boys grow up. Their
Yeah.
voice, their voices
Their voice
change.
changes.
So it was almost
God.
like a year. It was almost like a year later, but we got there.
Oh my
We
God.
got there.
You got there. The challenges
Yeah.
were there, but you certainly got there. Actually, with all the this show contains moments, as you say, of a large group of boys speaking, shouting, chanting, competing for attention. When you are in the mix, and you're dealing with sound and dialogue effects and foley and music, I just wonder what typically wins the battle for space. Is it always dialogue, or do you sometimes prioritize the surrounding environment too, because it's also part of the storytelling?
Yeah, that's really interesting, and especially in this piece, like I said at the beginning, because the natural environment has such a, the island was a character. You know, we set out to present the island as its own character, so it had to had center stage at some point. And there's a lot of areas with no dialogue, which are a lot of breathing. So we a lot of the breath we recorded, some of it we could save, um, just to create that tension and that presence. You know, when they close up to them, there's no dialogue and there's more breath. So it's really, like I said at the beginning, each moment and what was most important in the story and in the drama, where are we going with it? And dialogue is always king, and people will always say that. But like I just mentioned, some of the scenes, so there's a fine line between I'm not hearing this. I feel like I need to hear this line and I can't hear it. And between, oh, it's in the right level. So I know it's not that important. I could just about hear it, but I don't feel like I'm missing part of the story. And this is a constant challenge in mixing where you say, okay, well, this is too loud. I want it to be realistic. But where is the level where you think the audience think, oh, I think I missed that line, you know? So there was a lot of really fine balance when the chaos was happening on the beach of what lines were, you know, some of the lines were projected enough and shouted enough to quieten down. So we made sure that you can hear those. Some of them you pan on a couple of kids saying, just talking about, you know, shells and about this creature, and you hear bits and pieces of it, but the music is set to, is center at that point. Um, the same with the natural elements, the fire, for instance. You know, the fire, you know, was a
Yeah,
challenge on its own, but um, you know, it's really important to hear certain things about them worrying about the fire catching and taking more areas of the island, but still preserve that tension of the fire getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and that rumble bigger and bigger and bigger. So each moment to their own. Just going back to your question, each moment to their own. And stories, I wouldn't say the dialogue is king. I would say the story is king. And so, what helps us most at any point um, to get the story across?
yeah. Can I just say, Lord of the Flies is one of the most immersive television experiences I've had in such a long
Oh,
time, and it's because of
thank
the
you.
soundscape. And honestly, we've got to recognize this, that the sound artists who vote in these categories, they know what they're hearing, and they didn't just vote for the same old shows that everybody else votes for. They voted for you guys because in both categories because the sound is so damn good. And on that note, Neve,
Thank
congratulations
you.
again, and thank you for taking the time to speak with me today.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you.